Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're getting back into Peter David's Maestro, and it is super intriguing just taking this journey and seeing how the Hulk we know transformed into a Hulk that we don't even see as the same person. And I'm really just loving how Peter David is going back in this series and giving us the many years and the many details in between. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so when we jump back in, we're literally moments after where we had seen the Hulk part ways with MODOK. And with the way this is done, it's like you really can't blame him. And especially with the fake dream sequence, the fake family, the fake Avengers, like the Hulk is fresh out of the realm of Fugazi. But on top of waking up from this life that he found out that wasn't real, it's not like he wakes up in a world that's not that bad, but rather he wakes up in a world that's a nightmare. And with us seeing him sitting here like going through his thoughts, from him wishing that MODOK was lying, but then really coming to the conclusion that humanity had just did this to themselves. But it's also here where I feel like Peter David is taking another one of his great stories and very much infusing it into Maestro's origin. And even just 2 issues in, I feel like there's a number of places where this comparison can be made, both with 2020 Maestro and 2002 Hulk The End. And with the exception that in that case, like nobody survived. Like humanity was done. But with the way that Peter David continues our journey with Maestro, there are a number of similarities which I will be referring back to, just giving you a heads up. But also with the Hulk going his own way and leaving from MODOK, he then travels the world to different locations like the Hoover Dam, and later on he even makes his way to Vegas. And when he visits these different locations, he then thinks about the time that he has spent there. Like in Vegas, for example, as Mr. Fix-It or Joe Fix-It, but he just looks at the condition that Vegas is in now, at this point nearly 100 years in the future, and he just thinks to himself like Mr. Fix-It could not fix this. Which again is another moment that gives us those Hulk The End vibes. Though in that case, Peter David very much took the approach of telling the story of Banner, with him exploring the world and reflecting on the different locations and how he had changed, with where Banner was at certain points in his life, and the voice of the Hulk in that story just in the background, expressing his resentment for Banner. But it's like now with Maestro, it's the Hulk who's taking this journey. And it's like this time around, we see the Hulk in his journey with his pain, his resentment, and when he sees what mankind has done to themselves and to the world, it's then where it's like it's not only mankind brought their own destruction by destroying the majority of themselves, but then there's like the innocent wildlife who had nothing to do with it, but even still they had to succumb to the same fate. But with the Hulk continuing to jump around and travel around, we see him make his way to the nation's capital. And while he's there giving Abraham Lincoln a hard time, he hears some footsteps in the distance, to whom he finds out it's a little kid with an oxygen mask running around. And for the Hulk, he sees this as a good thing, because like for one, it's a sign of life. Because from what MODOK told him, there are survivors still lingering around, but even MODOK's unaware of how few or how many people are still out there. But in the case of the Hulk, he does see this little kid run away and climb his way into this little trap door. And in the case of the Hulk who's looking to find some sign of life, to him this is a sign of hope, because this kid has got to lead him to some other survivors, of whom at this point the Hulk is desperate to find. Which is super intriguing, because for the longest time, like your Savage Hulk, and like many years ago when the Hulk was way more simple, but for the longest time, like the thing that fueled the Hulk's anger, it had mainly stemmed from the point that he wanted to be left alone. And for years, nearly every time we'd see Banner Hulk out, "Leave me alone" was pretty much the Hulk's tagline. But as ironic as it is, when the Hulk actually gets left alone, like Peter David shows us once again, like that ain't what he wants. Like the Hulk doesn't want to be left alone. And it's like Banner didn't truly want that, and neither does the Hulk. But when the Hulk follows that kid down into that trap door, like first off, like this reminds me of this game that used to be on Game Gear, and it was an Incredible Hulk game that looked very much like this panel. And I'm not sure if this is like an intentional nod, but either way I appreciate it, because as soon as I read this, my mind went back to Sega Game Gear. Good times. Like I used to play that game every night till I passed out. But it's here when the Hulk climbs to the bottom and he goes through this tunnelway, where he's met by a group with flashlights and guns. And at this point, in no way does he feel threatened, because he knows these guys aren't AIM, because he does remember waking up and AIM having the guns that hurt. But it's here where the Hulk comes to find out that these guys are being led by Machine Man, to whom by design it makes sense that he's still alive and still here, or better yet, rather than alive, still operational. And when he sees the Hulk, he recognizes him and he tells him, "Hey, just call me Aaron, welcome to the bunker." But just for a little bit of quick history on Machine Man, because I don't believe we talked about him yet. But in the case of Machine Man, he had first appeared in 1977's 2001 Space Odyssey. And at the time, he was constructed as like the 51st model of his kind, but he was the product of a government project to where Dr. Abel Stack was trying to create an android that could perform as a soldier but make human-like decisions, which never goes well. And this was one of those circumstances to where like the first 50, they exhibited psychotic behavior, but Dr. Abel Stack was like, nah, 51, this one's gonna be different. And so then usually to where if they went off the rails, they had this explosive in their back that would go off. But in the case of X51, with him having his removed, he was then given the opportunity to explore his free will, live, and evolve. And through the years, that exploration went a number of ways, and in a lot of ways heroic, and in some ways not so heroic. But at this point far into the future where we find him, it seems like he's very much gone back to that heroic nature, or at least siding for a good cause, because it's here where we see him lead the Hulk to what's underneath what used to be the White House. And in this bunker, he has descendants of former White House employees who had likely brought their children in the bunker nearly 100 years ago when all the bombs went off. And he tells the Hulk that they have enough food down here to last at least another 17 years, which could be a problem because MODOK said it would be another 27 years before people can go outside, so that may be an issue. But with Machine Man showing the Hulk around, the Hulk notices a highly populated area, and Machine Man tells him that this area of the city, which was formerly known as New York, is now called Dystopia, and it was founded by its overseer, Maestro. And when the Hulk heard this, immediately he was like, I gotta go, I gotta meet this guy. But even with going, the Hulk thinks back on that name Maestro, and he remembers how back in college he had that nickname because he was so far ahead of his peers. But along his route of leaving the nation's capital and jumping his way over to New York, he noticed that he hadn't fully been recovered from his condition of waking up. So with continuing his journey, he gets a bit dizzy, he crashes into the ground, and then he's attacked by future evolved cockroaches, and they are huge. And you know they huge when they huge to the Hulk. But once again, this is another one of those moments which Peter David pulls from his 2002 Hulk The End, where at the time the Hulk would crush 10 and 100 more would come after. But I want to say at the time, like, those bugs had like plastic wings, like they were super tough, and like they had literally ate the Hulk down to the bristle. But in this instance, that just wasn't the case, because some people passing by use a sonic wave gun and they're able to chase the bugs off of them. But with the Hulk still being in this state of recovery, on top of being attacked by all these bugs, and then after that being hit with a sonic cannon, at that point he just passes out. But among these people that find him, their leader, his name is Boz, like B-O-Z, Boz, and without the T. And when we see him here, it's much like in the Future Imperfect storyline, where we see him as the leader of the Wasteland Survivalists. But it's interesting that during this time here, we notice that the Hulk introduced himself to Boz as Bruce, even though not long ago with MODOK, he had told him that he's no longer Dr. Banner, just call him Hulk. And even with him making his way out here and thinking over that name Maestro and how he had went by Maestro back in college, it really teases for us this searching of identity that's going on within him, to where one, the Hulk's trying to figure out who he is now in this world, or how he'll choose to adapt and live in it, but also possibly teasing the idea that he may know who this Maestro is. But it's here where Boz points off to the distance and he shows the Hulk the dystopia that he's been looking for, and Boz lets him know that's where the Maestro is, and they say that he's God. And the Hulk is like, oh yeah, I definitely gotta meet this guy now. But then it's also here where we jump over to Rick Jones. And at this point, you can tell we're really getting into that Future Imperfect territory, with us seeing all the relics of the heroes that have passed, with Spider-Man's black costume sitting in the corner, Silver Surfer's broken board, Bucky Barnes' arm, like the coat of Beast hanging on the wall. And I'm so glad Rick Jones didn't pick up taxidermy as like a hobby. But while he's here, still playing the harmonica, in Professor X's chair, he's then met by the arrival of his great-granddaughter, Janice. And when she gets here, she greets him as Gramps, but I'm pretty sure she's his great-granddaughter. But when she gets here, she tells him like, you need to know that he's back. And Janice had gotten word from Decord, who was also in Future Imperfect, and it didn't end well for Decord there, but we ain't got there yet. But with Janice coming here, she tells Rick that the Hulk is back, and he just walked into the middle of Times Square. And with making his way to Dystopia, he's asking around how does he get to Maestro, and it's then when he's met by the Minister, who we had known from Future Imperfect as Maestro's advisor. And from here, like when he takes the Hulk into like the inner courts to meet Maestro, the Hulk's asking more questions like who he is and where he's from, and the Minister more or less is just like, he's a god, man, you know, he comes where gods come from, on God. And really he's just less informative than the Hulk would like. But he does tell the Hulk after the destruction had happened, the world then started to go into chaos, and that's when the Maestro appeared, making himself leader and putting things into order. And there were some that contested his leadership, but none that had successfully dethroned him. But as they approach and the Minister calls for Maestro, telling him that he has a visitor, and lo and behold, when he comes out from behind the curtain, it's Hercules. which very much does explain the description of everyone saying that he's a god, and to be technical, demigod, but you know, I ain't trying to throw no shade. But for the generations living here, like, he's the strongest there is, at least until he isn't. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the Patreons. Thank you guys for all your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below to where you can head to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.